Chapter 23.
When Draco turned to Severus, the faint amusement on his face had evaporated. "Rumor has it," Severus said smoothly, "of a Malfoy family troll, Draco. Just make sure, when you're left to wander the dungeons with it during Christmas, you keep its diet strictly Gryffindor-based." December settled into a more subdued rhythm than the bustling months before. Classes, meals, sleep, study sessions with Granger, potions lessons with Severus, and solitary study were the norm, broken only by his stealthy night flights on Sundays, for which he still hadn't been caught, and his growing need to steer clear of Potter. This avoidance sometimes forced him into sudden retreats behind corners and statues to evade being noticed by Potter and his friends. Occasionally, Granger would spy him slipping away and shoot him reproachful looks, particularly after catching him in the astronomy courtyard ducking behind scraggly bushes. "Why are you so afraid of Harry?" she asked once. "He certainly isn't afraid of you." But her words were met with Draco's chilly silence, leaving her to reconsider pursuing the matter. Avoiding Potter became trickier when most of the school left for the holidays. It was a new challenge for Draco, as he'd never spent the winter break at Hogwarts before. It was another checkpoint of how his attempts to maintain or improve things had led to more complications. To his surprise, Weasley stayed too, providing Potter company and distraction. The Weasley twins' presence ensured the holiday atmosphere remained lively, and Draco found himself vexed at attempting to figure out which one might not survive the following years. Yet, the sight of his empty dining table was oddly unsettling, though he dismissed the ludicrous notion that he, Draco Malfoy, could miss Granger. Fortunately, Severus was around, not that Severus seemed to have anywhere but Hogwarts to call home. Draco yearned to spend most of his hours in the library, on the Quidditch pitch, or in Severus's potions lair. He was content to observe, study, or simply accompany Severus if permitted. However, Severus was often unavailable, grumbling about bothersome children perpetually in his way like house elves who had banged their heads too hard on oven doors, leaving Draco to his solitude for most of the holidays. Exceptions were made during meals, Christmas Day itself, and during Potter's sparse attempts to engage him. As Hagrid put the finishing touches on the Christmas decorations in the Great Hall, Draco felt an irresistible pull to admire the holly, mistletoe, and twinkling lights. They couldn't outshine the opulent ambience of Malfoy Manor on Christmas Eve, especially on the rare occasions when Father hosted his winter gala. But since his 4th year, there hadn't been such a celebration, and last Christmas saw no decorations, save for a brave arrangement of lights by the house elves and the grim adornment of bodies replacing icicles. Aunt Bella had been the sole soul to acknowledge the holiday, jubilantly inserting herself at Malfoy Manor beside her speechless sister during another gloomy Christmas in 6th year, in place of Father. Draco saw her presence as a looming threat, a reminder that he was under surveillance and that dire consequences awaited if he failed in his task against Dumbledore. Yet, the subsequent year revealed that Aunt Bella simply adored Christmas. She might have appreciated the sight before him during her Hogwarts years, a captivating charm in the unadorned grandeur, 12 grand trees without any ghastly ornaments. Perhaps even as a student, Aunt Bella would have fantasized about draping decorations alongside tinsel and pine cones. Being caught admiring these arrangements, especially by Potter himself, was embarrassing. Potter, crossing the Great Hall on Christmas Eve, paused at the sight of Draco's bright hair announcing his identity at the table. Those vivid green eyes seemed among the few willing to acknowledge a Malfoy's presence without trepidation. "Hey, Draco," Potter greeted, lifting a hand before approaching. "Happy Christmas Eve. So, what are you contemplating?" Draco glanced at Potter, the candlelight illustrating his features, the colorful lights of the hall casting shadows as evening gathered beyond the windows. "I'm not sure," he replied, fishing for a retort. He recalled the last substantial thing Potter had told him. "I know you're not your father." Perhaps the efficacy of basic incendiary charms on various Yuletide evergreens. Potter either didn't comprehend incendiary or still underestimated Draco's intentions. "The trees really are splendid, aren't they?" he said, smiling, repeating his Happy Christmas Eve before giving Draco a nod and making his way to the doors, exhibiting carelessness that suggested a complete lack of fear of being hexed by Draco from behind. The dungeons felt particularly frigid that Christmas morning, void of any sight of the other two Slytherins left from the 3rd and 6th year. Draco's sole interaction with them was that morning when they dutifully attended the lackluster celebration in Snape's undecorated quarters. They sat before the fire, listening to Severus recount a story of Salazar Slytherin's notorious disdain for the holiday season. Its pinnacle was the great hall flooded with snow, resistant to any form of removal, leaving Draco muffling laughter. Severus had shared this tale during rare Christmases at the manor, never joining the gala but bearing gifts for Draco and his mother, and partaking in a strong drink by her fire. It had been a tradition for Draco to request this tale. He hadn't anticipated hearing it again. Severus then provided each of them with vials of draught of peace, decorated with silver ribbons, before shooing them away. Draco didn't catch the names of the boy or girl, nor did they seem inclined to offer them. As Severus anticipated, Draco lingered until he was beckoned back to the fire. "Did any other gifts arrive for you? They should be at your bed's end." Draco shook his head, denying how it stung. He had spent a fair amount of time crafting another charm for Granger's bracelet, imitating one from his mother's collection, a Celtic St. Bridget's cross, yet received nothing in return. Possibly, his recent cursing endeavors disqualified him from such generosity. But if Aunt Bella taught him anything beyond the necessity for robust clemency and the futility of life, it was that even dark wizards need Christmas gifts. "Here," Severus insisted, presenting some papers. "Are we in agreement then?" "Absolutely." Draco shouted with enthusiasm and rushed forward, nearly embracing Severus in his armchair. At the last moment, he checked himself for caution's sake and instead bounced in front of Severus with delight. "Thank you, sir. Merry Christmas, sir." Draco dared to think he might see a flicker of a smile on Severus's face. "Be off with you. If you make me regret this decision, you'll regret it even more." "Understood, sir." Draco responded eagerly. Holding back the urge to sprint from Severus's chambers to the library, he walked briskly at first, but broke into a run as soon as he was outside. Upon reaching a few floors up, he remembered the library was closed for Christmas Day. At least 3 professors had found it necessary to remind him of that fact. Furthermore, after his conversation with McGonagall, further research seemed pointless. Still, he might uncover something beneficial another way, perhaps in a related book that could appease Severus. Besides, more thorough research might just prove McGonagall wrong, but for now he had to wait. He arrived late for Christmas dinner and was dismayed to see the Great Hall decked in an exaggeratedly grand manner. The number of turkeys covering the single extended table was excessively opulent, surpassed only by the surplus of wizard crackers scattered throughout, which the Weasleys were exploiting quite boisterously. Draco looked up with envy at the high table, laden with abundant wine. A thoroughly plastered Hagrid was only slightly less terrifying than Dumbledore donning a floral bonnet. Immortal, Draco thought, observing the teachers and students as he picked at his turkey, ignoring his Christmas pudding. It was like watching a scene in a pensive. They all seemed to believe they were immortal. Dumbledore's laughter cascaded down from the high table, and the Weasley twins' mirth joined it painfully from either side. They, along with Potter, appeared to be having a grand time with those tacky wizard crackers, known more for being the toys of commoners. The Great Hall seemed less grand with each moment of the feast, especially when Hagrid attempted to kiss McGonagall. This vivid display filled Draco's mind with the image of Hagrid carrying Harry Potter's lifeless body into the Hogwarts courtyard. He turned his gaze away, unable to discern which of the congratulating twins on Potter's new wizard chess set was marked for death by Draco's fellow Death Eaters. Draco had grown accustomed to the lingering presence of the dead, so much so that he could look Vince in the eye without frequently sensing the smell of something burning. But the overwhelming happiness around him was too stark a contrast to what he knew would come. It triggered shards of memory from the blue loop, which he thought had faded, to resurface with demonic clarity. He reached for his wand in his pocket, but instead of feeling the familiar curve of the Talon wand, he felt the straight, rigid line with conjoined spheres at the hilt. Dumbledore's wand after he had disarmed him, an unforgettable sensation in his hand as he watched Severus intone Avada Kedavra and Dumbledore soaring back. Pulling his hand away, he shoved it back into his pocket, finding his own curved wand again. Draco would go flying, or so he told himself, but struggling to breathe meant he had to stop and sit. He hadn't worn boots, just his third-best leather shoes, now soaking wet. He cast a warming charm on his feet, which provided little comfort, before flinging his wand down in a futile gesture of anger and wrapping his arms around himself to shiver. He was startled out of his self-pity by loud Gryffindor voices, quickly retrieving his wand and ducking behind a snowbank. It seemed improbable that Potter and his troop of Weasleys had noticed Draco's presence as they enthusiastically engaged in a snowball fight, turning the air into a swirling mass of white. Even the prefect joined in, choosing to freeze his hands through his shoddy, ill-made knit gloves by throwing like a muggle. Draco recalled snowballs hitting him out of nowhere one year in Hogsmeade, an incident he never logged in his notes. It must have been before he knew about Potter's invisibility cloak, otherwise, he would have suspected. It figured the Weasleys would teach Potter that trick. As he watched them from behind his fleecy wall, he muttered warming and impervious charms that seemed to offer no warmth or protection. He knew from experience that there was little chance of another episode on the same day. Yet, a strange constriction had settled over his chest at the sight of this merry chaos before him. He imagined cutting each one down in turn with Sectum Sempra, Weasley, and then Potter's blood dyeing the snow Gryffindor scarlet, but it failed to ease the tightness in his chest. His thoughts drifted to his parents, wondering if their Christmas gala continued without him, if his mother missed him, if she had even momentarily considered defying his father to secretly send him a gift before dismissing the idea. He extracted his 2 presents from Severus, carefully confirming the note was unharmed by moisture, then tucked it back safely and contemplated the draft of peace. He decided to save it for what's yet to come, skeptical that magic could bring peace to someone as isolated from belonging as him. "No, Ron," he heard Potter yell, rushing to rescue his favorite Weasley from the torment of the twins pushing snow down his coat. Draco allowed himself a single unguarded look at Potter, snow-covered and flushed with the cold, clothes and hair tousled with white, glasses askew, smile free and wild. Draco found he didn't wish to curse him or contemplate his hurt. He longed to be part of that playful scene, a massive joyful chaos, as if he had every right to be there, though initially, he had sneered at the idea of being with Potter and his friends. Was that truly what he wished for? To be among these carefree youngsters, unaware of their good fortune, freely tossing snow beneath the sun, as though none of them would ever suffer or die. Just to be there, to be wherever Potter was, blessed and revered as Draco had always envied yet despised in him, so wholly good in earnestness, because Draco had been truthful in the trophy room, Harry Potter was virtuous, and Draco found himself. Draco stood as the singular obstacle to his own achievement, hindered by himself and the mirror. Severus was in his chambers when Draco came knocking urgently at his door, unimpressed by the unscheduled appearance, and Draco leaving a trail of melting snow across his floor. "What is it now?" Severus sighed, retreating to his armchair with his book and whiskey, as Draco closed his eyes, wishing Severus had given him something other than the draft of peace. If only there existed a potion to instill him with the courage he required. "You can do this," Draco reminded himself. "You're a Malfoy." A mantra he relied on, yet it did nothing to bolster his confidence for what he needed to say. "Draco," Severus prompted, as Draco pictured Potter's snow-dusted face. "Severus, I'm from the future."
Or so he attempted to speak.
The words would have come if his tongue hadn't stubbornly clung to the roof of his mouth, rendering him silent. "Draco," Severus repeated, his irritation growing, as Draco strained to form the words that wouldn't come. "My apologies," Draco murmured, his voice barely escaping his lips. His tongue seemed to have a will of its own, suddenly plastering itself to the roof of his mouth, obstinately resisting his brain's desire to vocalize the looming confession. Words, fully formed in his mind, remained maddeningly trapped behind his clenched jaws. "Take your time, Draco," Severus commented with dry indifference, "whenever you feel so inclined," and his gaze returned to a gloomy tome detailing ancient poisons. Langlock, however, speaking of anything unrelated to the forthcoming seemed possible. There's a blue ring," Draco started, his voice so faint Severus barely caught it. Attempting to articulate its essence rendered him instantly mute. There was a mirror in the basements. He attempted once more, and found only silence. "I'm truly 18, silence. You murdered Dumbledore." Silence met him yet again, frustration mounting. Draco slumped into the chair next to Severus's, relieved in a backhanded way by being told to bide his time. "May I show you something, sir?" Draco proposed, hearing no response but proceeding anyway. He extracted a spare parchment and quill from his bag. Trying to note down, "I am not truly Draco Malfoy," his wand faltered, transcribing distorted runes instead, his hand spasming abnormally over the parchment, leaving black splotches in its wake. His attempt to pen, "You are deceased," suffered the same fate. Switching to his left hand proved equally fruitless. But when he wrote "Today is Christmas" with his dominant hand, the text flowed effortlessly clear. "Is there a purpose to your visit, Draco?" Severus questioned, his tone laced with sarcasm, "or merely to embellish my chamber with incoherent scribbles and stains?" "No, indeed, I have a purpose," Draco insisted desperately, retrieving his initial notebook. He tapped it with his wand and uttered, "Atrum incessio," before conveying it to Severus. "Please, just skim through it." "The entirety of it?" Severus echoed with skepticism, leafing through the pages with a concerning nonchalance, hardly appearing disturbed at contents any sane person might deem dubious. Eventually, he halted, reading aloud with idle amusement. Relief surged through Draco until he grasped Severus's chosen passage. "Informed Finnegan of the consequences of defaming Draco Malfoy. This, Draco, is your holiday disclosure? Would my lack of astonishment be any letdown?" "Is that the sole message you discern?" Draco queried, eyes narrowing. "Is there something within this tome I've overlooked?" "Just the fragment about the red loop graced the page, nothing more." Would any mention of the blue circuit simply vanish to others' eyes, but be visible to him? The script above Finnegan's entry was distinct to him. "Atrum in custodio," he intoned, his wand pressing the page, and watched the letters melt away. Did that alter anything? "Now hidden is your admission," Severus remarked dryly, observing that, for him, the text had indeed vanished as promised. The spells and concoctions had fulfilled their roles perfectly. It was merely forces preventing him from discussing the future, or, as McGonagall had termed it, the erstwhile future. The memory loop, blue she said, lodged solely in his mind's vault, barred from disclosure. What enchantments were woven upon that mirror? "An exemplary charm, Draco," Severus offered softly, a rare gentleness underscoring his words. "Is this what you desired to demonstrate?" Draco pocketed his quill and notebook, inspiration blooming faintly. "To some extent, sir. It was part of a larger endeavor for your holiday gift, yet incomplete. I do, however, have this." He revealed a meticulously wrapped green package, intricate metallic motifs playing across its veneer. Severus accepted it with the hesitance akin to an Auror uncovering a hexed relic. "What do we have here, Draco?" "A token," Draco answered, his voice wavering. "For you, sir. Apologies for the tardiness. Please unfurl it. Retaining it is not obligatory, merely a regret." Contrasting the elaborate effort behind Granger's trinket, this ring had been effortlessly conceived. Once the intricacies of the transformations were grasped, acquiring a section from the Slytherin house bathroom pipe and transmuting it into a polished turquoise ring demanded mere hours. The detailed handiwork, however, dragged on through desolate December times, laboriously etching the envisioned dragon Ouroboros design onto it was a trial, and he considered taking up traditional sculpting to expedite the process, assuming his magic smiting wand did not obliterate his creation. But eventually, Draco had achieved his vision, an embodiment of a dragon, scales and all, eternally claiming its tail and its maw. Severus did not swiftly ridicule or discard it into flames, which Draco had half feared given the inherent futility of ornamentation. An actual Ouroboros, Severus commented, eliciting an uncontainable grin from Draco. Turquoise. A distinct form. He examined it under the fire's glow, noting, a dragon Ouroboros, not a snake. How unsurprisingly self-absorbed. Raising an eyebrow at Draco, he slipped the ring onto his index finger, sizing it, providing Draco a pang as it sat too large. Hold on, Draco interjected, forestalling Severus's predictable reaction to what looked like novice-aimed wand work. His magic closed the turquoise band, the gem accommodating his touch, and settled around Severus's finger snugly. At last, it fit flawlessly. Draco marveled briefly at the precision he achieved with minimal focus, the fixation on leaving Severus astonished acting as a welcome diversion from the undisclosed truths he bore. Perhaps his attempt overshot. You crafted this, Severus uttered, scrutinizing the ring in the firelight. It was not purchased. Transfiguration achieved it, Draco clarified, additional boasts dissipating unspoken at Severus's recalibrated expression, not suspicion, but a new evaluation cast on him. You alone, Severus continued, no consultation with Professor McGonagall or your peers. The Muggle-born girl? Severus surely must recognize Granger's name by now. No assistance obtained, sir. IST. Borrowed, Knott's transformation tomes. An iron segment was my base, sir. Merely that, Severus sighed, suspicion honed in his keen eyes, too quickly caught onto the utilization of advanced transfiguration skills surpassing a novice year. For a heartbeat, Draco's mental shield felt a familiar, delicate probe. Instinctively, Draco willed them down but sensed that magic, or the mirror's will, countermands him with barriers indomitably firm. The gift, sir. Does it please you? Draco queried quietly. Severus regarded the young boy with icy detachment. One can only hope, he remarked, that in due course, a lad of your capabilities will channel such skills towards more worthy pursuits than crafting needless gifts for his godfather. As Draco exited, a smile played on his lips. The burden of deceit lay heavy on him, and with it the promise of increased responsibility and solitude. Yet all of that could be pondered later, perhaps with some guidance from the restricted section. Remarkably, he felt a buoyancy within as he departed Severus's quarters, mainly because Severus had not consigned the ring to flames.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this chapter, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to stay updated with more audiobooks. Happy listening!